you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hey folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers. A bit late today with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris. It's Friday, it's Q&A day, so get your questions in. Laura will grab them up. Yeah, thanks for, I was reading your comments. Thanks for understanding. Simple service turns into a recall, turns into you need rotors on a, frankly, 2-year-old vehicle. But that's, make sure when you bring your cars to a mechanic, ladies and gentlemen, if you tell them to check the brakes, they check the damn brakes. It said right on the notes, too, that they didn't actually inspect them. I just took a real quick look. All right, we got a lot I want to get through today because we missed some economic news yesterday. But then we got the jobs report today, and it's competing. Want to get to Georgia, early voting, getting a little bit better for Republicans. But frankly, John Fredericks, who some of you may or may not know, has been very critical of the RNC, especially since the election. Perfect example, again, where they have dropped the ball on Herschel. Although, listen, campaigns should not be relying on committees. The fact of the matter is, if they didn't see what happened on November 8th and automatically take the initiative to make changes, then that's on them as well. But there was early voting that Democrats were participating in, and there were for days before Republicans were, and there's like 2 or 3 days that Republican areas were not offering early voting, which put him in Walker at a significant disadvantage. Now, it does look like it's picking up. I would say still it's anyone's ball game, but normally, look, the vote by mail stuff, which we're going to talk a lot about, has changed the game, and it's giving Warnock the ability to be able to hold on when history would say he should have lost. All right. Now, he did get below 50, but the question is whether or not Republicans, 2 questions, whether or not Republicans are going to start voting by mail instead of waiting until the last minute, and whether or not they're depressed enough. So I'm going to have to, look at other polling, take their word for it. We're not doing Georgia runoff. It does look like to me with the Emerson poll that it's very, very close. Between that and the Fredericks poll, Fabrizio has Walker up by Warnock up by 4, but it's old. It's an older poll. So the fact of the matter is the polls weren't great. With the state of Georgia this time. So we'll just have to see. All right. So I'm looking at that early voting because to me, I was a minority in this for the entire cycle, folks. And you can't expect your voters. Maybe it's the military in me, but it's a logistical nightmare to expect your voters to accomplish in 8 hours what other voters, the other party's voters, have been given 2 weeks to be able to do. So, that's where they are. So they have to. Republicans have to realize they have to play the game. All right. Looks like I'm featured in Matt Gaetz's new little clip ad against McCarthy. I absolutely stand by that. The bottom line is there are more Democratic voters who have a very favorable opinion on Mitch McConnell, for instance, than there are Republicans who have a very favorable opinion. We've found that time and time and time again. So the bottom line is there's a reason for that. The reason is Democrats can always count on Mitch McConnell to stab his voters in the back. And Kevin McCarthy, is in that same, very much so, in that same boat. Yeah, honestly, Lloyd just saw that in the we're going to kind of do a real free-flowing show today because of the way things went today. But yeah, bottom line here is I agree with you, Lloyd. I don't think he took the month seriously enough. I really don't. And anyone who didn't see what happened, this is the second election in a row now where we're saying things like, well, this never happens. This is the first time ever. What has happened is, David, the vote by mail issue, it is the variable that changed everything. It is. And it gets worse in certain areas where there are more drop boxes than others. I don't think I got a chance to go over my example in detail with you. But one of the comparisons we were looking at, I know I mentioned it on Wednesday, but PA 5, David Galuch versus Mary A. Scanlon, along with Hung Cao versus Wexton in VA 10. Very similar demographics, even among the white vote, very similar. Educated versus working class, rural versus urban and metro and ex-urban, right? The difference between VA 10 and PA 5 is the participation rate in vote by mail. Even more so, more exaggerated by the disproportionate locations. Forget about the sheer numbers, but the disproportionate locations where there are drop boxes. And it's kind of funny because I was going over this today. The drop box seems to have a major impact. Take that for what you will at this point. I'm always pretty conservative with my analysis, guys, and I always like to wait for two things. I do like the Pew research post-autopsy exit poll analysis, but I also like the census. And the exit polls are all we have to work with right now, and they are less than perfect. All right. So, for instance, in the Guam race, Republicans were supposed to lose that by like 13 points, and the Republican actually won it by 4 or 5. All right. There are more than any other county. There are more drop boxes in Philadelphia, which there are parts of PA 5 that are in Philly. In Philly, there are 14 active drop boxes, and there are 42 in Delco alone. In Delco, outside of Philly, in Delco and the rest of the district, there are 45. So out of the entire district, 42 of them are in Delco. 42. That is not the case in Virginia 10. So I asked myself, similar demographics, similar swings in these demographics that not only myself, but many others measured. The Washington Post, ABC News, Washington Post poll, the CNN poll, the New York Times poll, the Wall Street Journal poll. I am not the only one who showed this. Yet it was very isolated, in isolated areas. The difference between the vote dumps in Washoe County, which, by the way, Adam Laxalt won the first one. What was the difference in the vote by mail vote dump that Adam Laxalt, the first 1,400 ballots that were dropped, Adam Laxalt netted 1,000 votes. What was the difference between that one and the other drops? The drops that Cortez Masto won came from drop boxes. That's the difference. And Arizona, which we'll have an update on, completely different story. David's in the audience today. And David will tell you they've been dealing with this in California for a very long time. So Republicans kind of got, what's the word? They got kind of wise to it, So they've been dealing with this for a while, but the rest of the country has not. And when it came to election reform in Georgia, where the runoff is going to take place next week, by the way, the links will be up, and yes, we will have live coverage. When it came to that, James, we'll get into that. It's a great question, or a great statement. We'll get into that. I see you in the corner of my eye. The bottom line is in Georgia, they absolutely just kind of left it alone, expanded access to some of these drop boxes in some of these areas. There was only one really major win, which was not even from the RNC and others. It was from private groups, like Matt Brainerd's group. They argued that it was not legal to treat drop boxes the way they were treating them because they were favoring certain voters over others, favoring certain locations over others. He didn't get everything that Matt Braynard didn't get everything that he proposed, or Look Ahead America proposed. And Republicans in Georgia dominating. They have the governorship, they have the Secretary of State, they have the legislature dominating it. They rolled over and they went along with this. Right? So, yeah, very white electorate in California. I mean, there are seats in California that Republicans won that they will not win in 2024. I'm telling you right now, take it to the bank. Republicans are maybe about to win it, about to win the last one, which is David's district. They still haven't called it over here, but you're still counting, David. I mean, look at Kern County, for crying out loud. It's unbelievable. Even though the math for Salas is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But that's only because of what you're talking about. The electorate was super white. Super white, and for California, pretty damn old. That's not going to happen in 2024. So unfortunately, their lack of ability, they being Republicans, their lack of ability to get those Hispanic voters to the polls is going to come back and bite them in 2024. They were disenfranchised with Democrats, so they just didn't vote. But they didn't vote for Republicans, not in areas where they absolutely could have and should have. In many of these areas where more liberal Hispanics are, I don't even think liberal is the right way to characterize them. Democratic is the right way to characterize them because they just have Democratic vote history. They are probably, many of these people are not even really liberal and would not call themselves liberal. They'll call themselves moderate, or most of them will call themselves conservative. All right. But that is true. Both things can be true, which is that they got lucky, they got a break because of the electorate, and they're not likely to get that break again in 2024. But it is also true that they've been dealing with this crap for so long that they have learned how to play the game. Mark Molinaro ran a fantastic campaign in New York 19. He learned his lesson. He played the game. That's why those late vote dumps just weren't brutal for him, and he was able to hang on. But you take an area as Pennsylvania's getting particularly bad, Georgia's getting particularly bad. The bottom line here is that Republicans have got to learn to play this game. We're going to get into Trump in a little bit, actually. The 2024 nominations, both parties, because I don't think we shouldn't say it's a given that Joe Biden will be the 2024 nominee for the Democratic Party. I don't think that's a given at all. And obviously neither do they, because it's now being proposed to move the Biden states to the front of the calendar. There is a huge chunk of the Democratic vote that does not want Joe Biden to run for president. No president has ever done as poorly as Joe Biden. Or not even president, no nominee, because they don't become the nominee. No candidate for the nomination has ever done as poorly as Joe Biden did in the early states and win the nomination. For those who don't know the backstory there, James Clyburn got the black vote on board in South Carolina, but Joe Biden failed miserably to place, forget about win, place. He failed miserably to even show in these early voting states. Why does this matter? That's where the base of the party is. Even though one of them, the first one, is a red state now, and I would say it's worth saying it's a red state, or it's a Trump red state. I think Mitt Romney would lose Iowa. I do. I think a traditional Republican, Paul Ryan, would get his ass kicked in the state of Iowa. A traditional Republican would have lost Ohio. It already happened to your boy. Remember in 2018? Remember? Schmuck boy. In fact, in your own damn state, Ron Johnson almost lost. So your logic just doesn't hold water. At the bottom line, let's get back to the bottom line. No candidate for president, Bill Clinton, they called him the comeback kid, but he didn't do as poorly as Joe Biden. He at least was placing and showing until they pivoted. They moved on. New Hampshire, he did better than expected, and they pivoted. They moved to the South and into the Rust Belt, and Bill Clinton was able to win the nomination. If the plan that Democrats are putting forward right now, or the team Biden is putting forward right now, if it is implemented, it would have prevented Barack Obama from becoming the nominee for president in 2008. Hillary Clinton would have been the president in 2008. She would have won the Democratic nomination, and she would have been president. The corporatist wing of the Democratic Party will be buoyed by this plan because nothing against you, South Carolina, but you're machine voters. You do what the machine tells you to do. And that's true of the Rust Belt when it comes to the Democratic Party. Non-white voters make up at least 40% of the Democratic primary electorate. It's getting more so as time goes on. New Hampshire, Iowa, white voters in general, base progressives, you will have no say. Because it's not even true to just say white, because Bernie did so well with minorities in Iowa. He had satellite caucus sites. He carried the minority satellite caucus sites. People don't like to talk about that. He did. He did fantastic. Won Latino Democratic caucus goers in Nevada. Won them. Only trailed Biden by low double digits among black caucus goers in Nevada. If this plan goes into place, the corporate media and corporate America that funds the Democratic Party will pick. They will pick the Democratic nominee for the foreseeable future. Barack Obama won and was able to take out the Clinton machine because he pulled the miracle of Iowa. Remember? Only one pollster had Barack Obama winning the Iowa caucuses. Everybody else had Hillary Clinton winning. He pulled it out. Pivoting into New Hampshire, he was gaining. She cried a little bit. And that helped her win New Hampshire. But she was underperforming everywhere else. It was Hillary Clinton who had the machine black vote in 2008. She was the one. Barack Obama just simply being black did not give him the black vote, folks. That's not how the historical record is when it comes to the 2008 nomination. Bill Clinton stuck his big foot in his big mouth and helped chase the rest of the black coalition away from his wife by basically saying, black voters, well, I'm not even going to repeat what he said because Bill Clinton's allowed to get away with something like that, but I'm not. Right, Lord? Right? Yep, it's cool for thee, but not for me. Had this calendar existed that they are proposing, 12 years ago, or wait, oh my God, 14 years ago, Barack Obama would have lost the Democratic nomination in 2008. Hillary Clinton would have been president from 2009 to 2017. All right, so that's the left side of this. The right side is it does appear that Donald Trump has bounced back from, speaking of putting foots in mouths, we talked about this a little bit on Wednesday. The reason why I think the Rush theory kicked in is because you cannot attacking Youngkin, who won in 2021. It was a great victory for Republicans, gave them very high spirits. They almost won New Jersey and would have if it wasn't for their failed leadership. The Ricketts run the Republican Gubernatorial Association, Republican Governor Association. Doug Ducey is a figurehead. He's a tool. He's a puppet. They bailed on Citarelli. He was too normal for them. He wasn't elitist enough for them. He, God forbid, could drive his car up and down Route 9 and shake hands at the Regent Diner with voters. So he's not one of them. He's going to sit down and have a crock and a half, a half a grilled cheese and a crock of French onion and talk to voters. That's not good, man. Where's the rack of lamb, says little boy Rickett. Where's the rack of lamb? I don't like these people, and I don't want to sit in a booth with these dirty voters, yo. I can't support that guy. Anyway, still big wins for Republicans in 21. Took back the House of Delegates. Big wins. Florida, a bright, shiny spot on the map for Republicans in an otherwise very disappointing night. So attacking these wins is what pissed Republican voters off with Donald Trump. Opened up a hole of criticism. So obviously he's responding when he does this. Because, well, let me just say, it does look like he is bouncing back in the polls. However, now till then is a very long time. And if he's going to keep doing what he's doing, he could seriously endanger what is otherwise his ball, his game to lose. All right. But here we go. This is obviously him reacting. Because, look, Trump is nothing if he isn't responsive.
People have been treated unconstitutionally, in my opinion, and very, very unfairly. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And you know what I've said. I take it very seriously. I have never seen anything like it at all levels. It's the weaponization of the Department of Justice. And we can't let this happen in our country, because our country is going not socialist. They've skipped over that. They skipped over socialism. Our country is going communist. This is what happens, and we can't let it happen. We have to stop it. So I want to thank everybody for working so hard. I know how hard you're working to get justice for people that are imprisoned right now and people that are being tormented. We can't let it happen. We're going to stop it, and we're going to win. Thank you all very much.
So that's him finally responding to the January 6th protesters who are in jail for supporting him. All right. Even though you know how I feel about this, guys. It's not that was not an insurrection. It's absolutely ludicrous to believe that it is. But this is where he fell short. All right. Well, not just this, but we're just talking about the Georgia election reform laws. Barnes and I have said a lot. We still say to this day, if he wanted to be productive, he should have been involved in that fight. Then maybe Herschel Walker would not have been forced to a runoff right now that he is struggling to win. All right. The January 6th protesters. I get asked to go to DC to speak at this rally for the January 6th people. The very first thing on my mind as people are telling me these horror stories, Laura, you want to pop in, you chime in by all means. These horror stories about their family members. The first thing I turn to Laura and I say is, where's the president? Where is the president? Why am I sitting over here?
Well, it's really sad because not only that, these are normal everyday people getting thrown into solitary confinement, which means, no outside, dark holes, no electricity, whatnot, pee in a corner ordeal. Then we had very sick people who had medical conditions that were dying, and nobody thinks where are the news channels about these people, these innocent people who have died in jail?
But Laura, this has been going on for years, not just Trump supporters, black and brown people. They never gave a damn. They never gave a damn. You heard it as well as I did. This is the abuse in that jail has gone on for years, and nobody gave a damn. He knows better than anybody what it's like to be prosecuted by the system, persecuted and prosecuted by the system. He should have been the one to be there, Laura.
Well, absolutely, 100%. Actually, everyone should be there because this is a trial run, people. If you don't see this as a trial run to subjugation, I don't know if you're blind or just in pure denial. That's where I'm at.
Yep, she's right. She's right. Everybody should have been there from, and again, this is why some of these people like Andy Biggs, Matt Gaetz, and others. I mean, this is why Kevin is running into the problems he's running into right now. David, you know better than anybody. He was not there for these people. He was not there. So it's like he wants to be the leader of the only legislature that Republicans control or should control. And yet he has not spoken to any of these issues. I mean, so that's why some of these people just haven't, they won't let up. They're not going to let up. They just don't feel like he's done enough He is not the guy for the time. And by the way, I understand, even I know our buddy Charlie, Laura, is like, now's not the time to go after Kevin, blah, 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 right? This is what makes you think that anything's going to be different simply making Kevin McCarthy the speaker? If your best argument is Hakeem Jeffries could be the speaker if we don't rally around Kevin, that's a terrible argument. Kevin could step down and somebody else could go forward. We talked about this on Wednesday.
A real American patriot would do so. Because if you are not representing your party, you do not deserve to be in the leadership role.
He doesn't have the votes, Laura. He doesn't have the votes.
And what does that tell you?
Yeah.
That's all that needs to tell you right there. That's it.
And Kevin, I want to put this up. I said it's going to be a little free-flowing today. David says, I nominate Tom McClintock. I second that nomination, David. I second that nomination. Tom McClintock would be a much better leader. It's a matter of who is representative of the voters. You may dislike Hakeem Jeffries, guys, the Republicans in the audience. You may hate his guts. But guess what? Hakeem Jeffries represents the average Democrat. He does. The average Democratic voter. Hakeem Jeffries was a collusion delusion pusher. Hakeem Jeffries repeatedly referred to the 2016 election as illegitimate. Hakeem Jeffries said things that most, and I don't know if he believes them or not. I can't get into the man's soul, but he says what they believe. So you may think he's a total nutcase, but guess what? He's mainstream. I'm not saying it is mainstream or moderate, but he is representative of the widely held views in the Democratic Party. That is just, he's a denier, Derek. Derek, you can't make this stuff up. They spend months and months talking about how dangerous it is to elect election deniers. And they just replaced Nancy Pelosi, who, for all of her faults and flaws, at least she was a little bit more careful with her language in 16, 17, 18. She was a little bit more careful. Even though she let, them move forward with their plans, she still didn't say some of the most ridiculous, not supported by the facts. He did. And Russ is right. Frankly, he makes comments that I view, and I don't know how you can't view them, to be racist. The man appears to be a total racist. And somebody else seconds that as well. I mean, that's where they're at. Anyway, so who would vote against Tom McClintock? This is a good conversation. What about, David, seriously, what about Jim Jordan, folks? What about Jim Jordan? He played ball. He was a team player.
And he supported McCarthy.
And that's what I'm saying. He was a team player. Mm-hmm. He supported Kevin McCarthy. It didn't work. It didn't work. I don't know that these people are going to budge. I don't know. I don't know that they're going to budge.
This all goes to Messiah syndrome.
He's got about 5 people right now. It is the Messiah syndrome. It is. Yeah, Cruz Vet says, and I want to bring this up because if you may remember a rant, let me pull something over. You may remember a rant that I went on maybe a month or so before the election. It's absolutely true. What was it? It wasn't Marvin. It was Cruz Vet. He said that Democrats invented election denying. 2000, 2004, 2016. Cruz Vet is 100% right. In fact, Democrats basically denied the legitimacy of every presidential election they lost this entire century. We're a quarter way through the 21st century. They never recognized the legitimacy of a single one that they lost anyway, I should say. Not yet, not one. Bush was illegitimate in 2000. He robbed Florida. Remember? He robbed Florida. I mean, we'll go over this again. Let's cover this territory again. He robbed Florida. He lost the popular vote. The Washington Post spent millions of dollars in investigating how many votes really Al Gore would have won Florida by. Ironically, they found out that George Bush not only won the state of Florida, he probably would have won it by more votes than the official count. That was their final conclusion. The whole upper echelon of the Washington Post was chopped out. They were fired, kicked to the curb. Yet we move into 04. It's a very close election, but he beats John Kerry, and he does so by carrying the state of Iowa and carrying the state of Ohio. And not only did he win Florida, which he didn't, he carried New Hampshire the first time, but he added Iowa. But Florida was, of course, a major target for Kerry. He got swift boated and really hurt him in Florida. Plus, Florida, is like one of those states where you can be close in a competitive non-incumbent election, but then for an election that an incumbent's going to win, it may not be that close. And in the end, it was very much like Trump's win in Florida in 2020. It really wasn't that close. Bush almost won Miami-Dade. It was a lot whiter back then, but he came within 6 points like Trump. The margin was identical, actually. Trump would carry Miami-Dade now because we have a lot more naturalized voters that are and people who fled. That's what changed Miami-Dade. So anyway, moving forward here, they used the exit polls, basically a ridiculously it was not credible analysis of exit polls, which were wrong. In the state of Ohio to argue that it was statistically impossible for John Kerry to have lost the state of Ohio. Barbara Boxer, who's not even from Ohio, decided she was going to challenge the delegates. It was ridiculous. In 2016, we all know the story. The now leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. I don't have to go get him from Twitter. You can find him yourselves. The more we learn, the more clear it is how illegitimate this election was. They haven't recognized the legitimacy of a single Republican presidential win in the 21st century. Not one, not yet. So you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I have been, and I will just tell you this, I don't know how much I can say, but I see Marty's comment there, and I don't know how much I can say, but I have been doing a lot of work.
Just say what I said.
I have been doing a lot of work and analysis in Arizona, and I mean, you're going to all hear about it real soon anyway. So
the fight is ongoing, and that's it.
I don't want to say too much, but I will say this. I'm very disappointed that there aren't more people, not just in my industry, but period. I mean, you don't have to be a numbers guy, folks, to see what happened there that day. Again, don't wait until election day to get all your votes in, because it's very easy to have somebody throw a wrench in your plans and screw it all up, but it happened, and it's not random. That's all I'm going to say. It's not. If it was random, and eventually you'll see it. We went over some of this on Wednesday, but I can't say everything, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The RNC abandoned them. The RNC has abandoned them. The RNC is, yes, Kevin, they bailed. They absolutely bailed. $1 billion data operation. What a joke. With serious database latency problems. Yeah. So So basically, there it is. There's that. Moving forward here, we were just talking about the Democratic nomination. The Republican nomination, Trump has gotten some valid criticism, and that was very clearly his attempt to respond to that. Because what they're hoping to do here is, and David, who's in the audience, has been saying this for a long time, and he's 100% right. Their plan all along, and I tried to tell you that McCarthy was counting votes, not seats. Their plan was to basically, they thought they had seats to spare, so their plan was to sabotage the new right. I don't want to say Trump. The media does this, and it's not the correct way to phrase it. Yes, they were backed by the former president, but they tried to sabotage. A more appropriate way to say this is the new right. And then they hope to use that as a way to say, there, I told you so. And if you missed it on Twitter from the other day, it's very much, this is what I said, it's try to understand it like this. It's very much like how a abusive husband keeps their wife in line, right? So you basically beat the hell out of the woman, make her look ugly, and then say that, abuse them, scare the hell out of them, make them afraid of failure if they venture out on their own, and you make them look real ugly from knotting them up, giving them two raccoon eyes, from breaking their nose, and then you say, see, I'm the only one who will love you. That is what the Republican leadership has been doing to their base for a long time. But now, because they felt so threatened, it's like, an abusive spouse starts off maybe shoving or, getting slightly physical with their spouse. But then when they really feel that they're threatened and the relationship can end, that's when they just haul off and beat the shit out of them. And then they'll say what I say. I told you. This is all your fault. I'm the only one who would love you anyway. That's what's happening to the Republican base right now. Yep. That's it. So
Sad.
Yeah.
It's beyond sad.
It's the way it goes, I mean, it's the way it goes. It really is.
It's
Now,
true.
there is never one explanation. Again, there's never one explanation for what happened. There's very seriously, the vote by mail issue is a big thing, but sabotage is very real. And if you don't understand, if you're not in this world and you don't understand why it's easy to sabotage and how impactful it is, then it needs to be explained to you. So let's take John Gibbs. All right. John Gibbs had to get rid of his team that won him the primary. All right. And had to take all of Kevin's friends as their consultants. He had to do it. He wanted to be able to raise money and he didn't want to get blacklisted. Throughout the entire time, Hillary Schulten is driving up his negatives through abortion. Abortion is the more I look at it, the more the abortion explanation just doesn't hold water at all. It's not what happened. But basically, she's driving him up with that, driving him up with other negatives, and his negatives are going higher, higher, higher. Instead of responding, he comes to me, Rich, what do you think I should do? You have to go on the offensive. You cannot not respond. And in fact, anytime you run or you're on the defense in politics, you are losing. Anytime you are on the defense, you are losing. But he was told, you're going to do what we want you to do. You're not going to defend yourself. You will ignore this stuff. And you will talk in very general terms about inflation and Joe Biden. And that's it. The supporting groups from their little alliance spent all their money on crime, running ads on crime. Do you know how the percentage of voters in Michigan's 3rd congressional district cared about crime as their number one issue? About 3%. 3%. That's it. So the problem is they will turn off the spigot. They will turn off the spigot on you if you don't listen to them. But their strategy is stupid. So if you do, it's like if you're an outsider who cannot self-fund, it's almost a lose-lose. And that's why establishments and status quos are always so entrenched. They control the purse strings. They control the fundraising apparatus. That's just the reality of how campaigns work. And sadly, you need money. And that's the thing, David. They didn't give him the help anyway, did they? He got clobbered. So he shut up and did what he was told to do with the promise that they would give him money to match Hillary, or at least help him raise it, or not tell donors, don't give to this person. They didn't even make good with their promise anyway. And there are tons of other examples. Tons. He's not alone. Not by any means. And there are some, that's really where it's at. And actually, I don't think Trump should attack DeSantis or Youngkin. He should focus on the future if he wants to run. If Donald Trump wants to be the president again, he doesn't need to attack them. He doesn't. He's got a record as a president. I mean, that nobody wants to hear any petty fights, and nobody wants to hear that crap. They really don't. The voter doesn't want to hear about that, especially not a Republican primary voter. Why would you do that anyway when you have such a robust record? You could say, every Republican president promised to end Roe v. Wade. I did it.
That should be his whole entire campaign. I did that.
Every president told you they were going to renegotiate trade deals that hollowed out your entire communities. They failed you. I didn't. Every president told you, and this is enormously important to the base, especially the Midwest and evangelical base. Every Republican president told you, and that's not true. Obama and Bill Clinton promised it too. So every president, not just Republican, every president promised to move the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They failed you. I didn't. Every president promised to reform the VA system. They failed you. I didn't. Every president promised to be able to drill in Anwar and become energy independent. They failed you. I didn't. I mean, you have a record to like harken back to insignificant crap and attack people who are, again, I don't know how else to put it other than you're like pouring salt on a wound. Like, yeah, that's it. That's not like, that's what you're doing. You're pouring salt on a wound. Youngkin is a winner. DeSantis is a winner. Your voters like them. It's just, to me, it's irrelevant to just, they come at you. Yeah, Joel, bam. I mean, I would put it up on the screen, Joel, if it wasn't for the F-bomb, but he's 100% right. Get rid of Make America Great Again. The slogan should be, I told you so. I told you so. That's what Grover Cleveland did. And we've talked about this a lot. How, the similarities are here. Grover Cleveland very much was like, no. And in fact, he was a little bit more reluctant. I think Trump, too, is like fighting for survival to some extent. I know he cares deeply about the country. I know he does. I've seen it in his eyes. I saw it in his eyes in 2015, Laura, at CPAC. I remember him saying, I don't want to do this, but I can't see a country if another Bush or another Clinton wins the White House. It cannot be these people again. He was very reluctant for all the people. Of course, everyone who runs for president is an egomaniac. So for the left, always, and some on the right, you're like, oh, Trump's an egomaniac. They're all egomaniacs. Have you never worked for any of them before? They're all egomaniacs who think they are the second coming of the Messiah. You have to be somewhat egotistical at least to run for any office. But to run and want to be the president of the United States, you have got to be an egomaniac. I'm sorry, it's just true. There's a lot of good studies, by the way, on the psychology and the personality profiles of rich and powerful people. How do you get to be, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company? And why are such a high percentage of these people narcissists? It's a real phenomenon. So Trump is not alone in being an egomaniac. Even if they all like a George Bush kind of figure, says like God told him to run for president. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for making my point. His own parents didn't want him to run for president. They wanted Jeb to be president. It's true. They didn't want George to run. They thought he was stepping on Jeb. They did. They thought he was stepping on Jeb's toes. Georgie Sr. and Barbara did not want George W. to run for president. They always saw Jeb as the president. Always. All right, so you got to be egomaniac. You got to be a bit of an egomaniac. So Casey Sherwin says, I'm afraid Trump can't turn over a new leaf. You know what? And honestly, I think that I don't know who's not thinking that. Can we be honest here? I don't know who's not thinking that. Yeah. And Squid, come on. You're a Trump hater, obviously. Where's your wall? It's about 85% done. If you would have followed the Customs and Border Patrol website, they would have showed you an interactive graphic throughout his entire presidency of how much wall was being built. The Biden administration took it down. It was not completed, but he did a lot. You just never heard about it. If your source of information is Mike Cernovich or something, then that would be why. It was literally an interactive graphic on the website for Customs and Border Patrol. Literally. They showed you sections, progress, and everything. But yeah, whatever you want to call it, the bitching and moaning and the self-absorbed stuff. I am telling you, if it was a romper of a midterm for Republicans, then maybe he would have been able to get away with a lot of that. But I really do believe that's going to wear on people. I do. And he has the most powerful argument there is. I did it. They never did. Being president is a lot different. Like I personally tend to prefer, it's just my own opinion, I tend to prefer executives and governors. Ronald Reagan was a governor. Even Bill Clinton, whether you agreed with him or not, he was just certainly a better president than most of the people that the world puts forward now. Bill Clinton triangulated. He balanced the budget. He was not an ideologue, right? He was the governor of Arkansas. So I tend to favor governors, but it doesn't mean because somebody's a governor, they're ready for prime time. Scott Walker was a massive disappointment. George Will's wife ran his campaign into the ground, and he didn't even seem to give a damn that he was doing it. He would refuse to react to people who had supported him and known him for years, telling him this is not the way to go. This is not how to beat Donald Trump. Walker, I remember polling in the nomination period, in the early nomination period, before Trump had even taken the lead for the Republican nomination. Walker was the only candidate to be leading in both the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire, because we were polling both at the same time. And we thought, Cruz would be a big contender in Iowa, but have a lot of trouble in New Hampshire. And that was the case. The only candidate to run ahead of the pack was Scott Walker before the consultants got a hold of him. And, he was just like a dark horse. And people kind of thought, he wasn't a dark horse because people knew he was going to run. But look, fantastic governor. Whether you liked or hated what he did, he did it. He stuck by it. Polling a state like Wisconsin, you'd hear from the Obama, Walker, and then later Obama, Walker, Trump voter. And you'd say, why? How could you vote for Barack Obama and you're going to vote for Scott Walker again? Because he's been recalled. And people would just say, because I know where Scott Walker stands. Like, I know where he stands. He's authentic. And I may not always agree with him, but when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. He had that appeal about him. And people generally liked him. And that cut across from like conservative Iowa to much, much more moderate New Hampshire. And if there's a candidate who can take both, then they're going to have a very easy time, because South Carolina, even though it is a southern state, there's a lot of moderate primary voters from the Republican side in South Carolina. And people made the mistake a lot of thinking that South Carolina was, Southern Carolina state, and that would be, very conservative, like Iowa's conservative during the caucus. And that's just not true. So he really had, he did take it hard to the public sector unions. I'm telling you, Wisconsin is the state it is because of Scott Walker. I remember talking to Sean Trendy about the voter analysis models over the years. You go back to when Scott Walker first won, in that governor's race, that gubernatorial election. That voter file was like D+6, guys. Inferred party was D+6. It was like Democrat 38, Republican 32. And then Walker and Sean Trendy said, he was like, I think this probably has a lot to do with right to work. And he may have been right. I actually think that's a really good theory, because it wasn't that long after we were headed into the election of Trump. But by the time we got to Trump beating Hillary, it was still D+3 in Wisconsin. It's R plus now, and in fact, in 2020 it was R plus 1. It's R plus now, but that happened under Donald Trump. It was still D plus before Donald Trump. Crap, I'm way over break here. Let me get to let's get to a couple words from our sponsors, and then when we come back, we could get to economics about as much as I wanted to, but we'll get to some of your questions. I just wanted to go over, you know what, and real quick we can do it. The jobs report's a little bit more that I wanted to go into in depth, but construction spending was down 0.3 of a point again this month. It was expected to drop, but only by about a tenth of a percentage point. The ISM manufacturing index, we were talking about the PMI on Wednesday. This one is from the ISM. The PMI from Wednesday, that's Chicago. The Chicago PMI, that fell to 37, which is basically pandemic shutdown levels. Like the ADP jobs report was in shutdown level territory. Negative manufacturing, a lot of negative manufacturing jobs. This time, the ISM, this is the encompassing one of the nation. It does indicate contraction. It fell to 49. It was initially reported last month for October, for the month of October. It was initially reported as just above expansion, 50.2. But when it was revised with this report out, or yesterday it came out, it was revised down to 49.9. So technically had already fallen into contraction. Contraction, folks, meaning, And now it fell another almost whole point to 49 flat. So it does kind of piggyback off of the Chicago PMI, and that really sucks. Jobless claims weren't great at all, but they weren't as bad as expected. So personal income and outlays, a little bit better than thought. And the employment situation report today was actually better than expected. It's a household survey. It's not like ADP, which is actual payrolls. But unfortunately, unemployment was flat, and the participation rate actually fell. It did not rise. And our average hourly earnings was about 0.6 of a percentage point on the month over month. Year over year looks very strong, but the BLS specifically states themselves that wage data has been extremely distorted. And 5.1 in any other circumstance would be fantastic, but not with inflation where it is. So real wage gains are actually pretty much in the toilet. But the overall number, 263, not a bad number. More than the consensus, not a bad number. Manufacturing, however, was a lot less than expected. And you take that into consideration with the ADP report because this is just a household survey. So, I mean, which one do I care about the most? When it comes to markets, I'll tell you, looking at small mid-cap stocks especially, they care more about the ADP report. When you look at like large cap reactions, they tend to care more about the household survey and the overall, I would say, business, finance, news sector seems to care more about the employment survey from the BLS. However, it's extremely volatile, whereas ADP is not as volatile. So we'll just have to see. All right, let's take a real quick minute for a read, and then we'll get back and answer your questions. And I may need like a 30-second break for some water. All right, look. Getting into economic news, and we talked about this the other day, you absolutely have to prepare for food shortages, drought, inflation, even new policies are absolutely pushing America's food supply to its breaking point. And that's why survival food is more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits like Laura and I have done for our family. We're talking about good for 25 years survival food, hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the USA. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water resistant, and they stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. You make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP to get your 3-month survival kit today. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. And I will tell you right now, every one of those free gifts absolutely are worth it. We're not talking about trinket free gifts. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP to build your own stockpile today. And while you're out there, folks, don't forget to use promo code TPP10 if you're surfing their site to get a site-wide 10% discount. Again, TPP10, buying any of their other awesome products on their website, and make sure you take advantage of the 10% offer for being a viewer of the People's Pundit. All right, and of course, it is getting to be the end of the year. You may be wondering, what do we do with our money? Want to put some away? Where pop it? Do I stick it in the market? The market, where else? Mutual funds. What do I do here? Diversify is the name of the game. All right. Bottom line is, the last time, folks, the economy looked as wobbly as it did. Inflation skyrocketed. The economy tanked. Yet gold rose 14%, so 1,400%. Silver even more. By the way, I'm loving silver right now. I'm not, going to do a Jim Cramer, but I'm loving silver and platinum. Silver, platinum. All right, but check out the free gold IRA kit that you can sign up for if you go to tpplikesgold.com. tpplikesgold.com. This is a great opportunity to make sure you harness the opportunity that we saw during the Great Recession. Don't miss out on it if it happens again. And this is actually a great time for this. You could get upwards of $15,000 in free silver if you take advantage of this offer. All right, so check it out. That's tpplikesgold.com. tpplikesgold.com. Real quick on Arizona. And then we'll get to the rest of it. And I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of questions on Arizona, but it does appear, even though they had lied about it at first, it does in fact appear that Katie Hobbs, her office, did threaten the Mojave County supervisor with arrest and prosecution if they fail to certify the results of their elections. All right. Now, I'm not saying there's not something in the statute. I am saying, however, that the media and people affiliated with Hobbs first called this man a liar when he went during the public meeting and said, I would vote not to certify this election. However, I've been threatened with jail time if I don't do it. And all the blue checkers, now I know you could just buy a blue check, but all of the previous blue checkers from Twitter were like, that's not true. This guy's blowing things up, blah, blah, blah. Well, in fact, it absolutely is true. So, now that the letters have been leaked and some of them public, Arizona State Elections Director Corey Lork wrote several letters and emails to members of the board, warning them of criminal charges if they refuse to certify the results in time. All right, they called it nonfeasance. The Secretary of State did contact our county and cited ARS Section 16-1010 as a statute that could be used to prosecute the board if they did not certify the election, said Matt Smith, the Mojave County attorney to the DCNF. This statute is an Arizona felony statute regarding election officials who fail to perform their duties, unquote, under the law. As a Class 6 felony, upon conviction, it could result in up to 2 years imprisonment. Actually, maybe it's me, but I would look at that statute as applying to people like Stephen Richer and Bill Gates, not for people who have a lawful right to either vote yay or nay to certify an election result. Like, that is not what the founders had in mind when they, created this system that then states decided to model off of. It's administering elections, doing what keeping, for instance, Southern Democrats keeping Black Republicans from the polls in Jim Crow, deciding they're going to lunch when the Black vote is delivered to the polls that day, deciding they don't have enough ballots. Shocking, we ran out of ballots once the parade arrived. We're just not able to put it in the box today. That's what I would have thought that statute is for. Exactly. Then why do they have a certification process? Because the certification process is clearly modeled off of the framework the founders laid out. It makes zero sense that you would have a certification process if you were just supposed to go through the motions of certifying it, otherwise be subject to federal, a felony, excuse me, not federal, a felony charge. This is crazy to me. Crazy. Not administering elections correctly is what I would have thought. Okay, that's a good question. Let's get to some of these questions. And I wish I could put them up all on the board so you don't have to just look at me. But do you think if Herschel loses, the RNC will finally start to take ballot harvesting more seriously as a campaign strategy? No, I think they'll blame Donald Trump. I mean, honestly, James, that's what I think. I think
when they underperform, they blame Donald Trump for their loss, and when they overperform, they take credit for their win.
Did you hear Paul Ryan say, we just had traditional Republican candidates, we would have taken the Senate? Really? Are you kidding me? That is the stupidest thing ever. You had your traditional candidate. You couldn't even win your own home state, asshole. Why would you think that? Why on earth? I pulled it back, Laura. I pulled it back. Why would you think that? I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but it wasn't just me. Emerson, the New York Times, all the polls that polled this cycle and did a presidential ballot, a generic ballot, and a Senate ballot. At the congressional level and at the Senate level, Republicans ran behind Donald Trump everywhere. Mark Mitchell and I from Rasmussen were just talking about this the other day. Emerson found it. I found it. Individual state people found it, like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. May have been a close Senate race for Georgia, but the presidential rematch was not close at all. It may have been a small margin for Republicans in a state like Nevada, but it was like 9 points for Donald Trump. Oz may have been down by 3, and in one poll that we did, he was down by 3, then he was up a little. Donald Trump was still ahead by 7. So what is Paul Ryan talking about? Remember, I hear your voice. He heard a voice. Paul Ryan, we're still waiting for your consensus plan on healthcare. Okay? That's what did. You want to talk about losing elections and being held to blame. In 2018, they lost the House because of healthcare. No other issue. Healthcare. Now, some voters voted on Russia collusion, but for the most part, in the battleground states, if you take the exit polls at the face value, which I know is hard to do, but if you do, the voters said they were given a choice in 2018. Do you think it's a legitimate investigation or do you think it's a political persecution? And in the battleground states, voters said it's a political persecution. Hell, when McSally lost by 3 points, Donald Trump's approval rating in that state was 51%. So I just, it's easy to do that and not look in the mirror. So unfortunately, James, for them, I think they would just blame Donald Trump. They're going to be slow to the roll because as it stands right now, the infrastructure for both parties, especially the fundraising infrastructure, is very different. It's built very different and it benefits very different levels of the party. In the Democratic Party, they have Act Blue and where the money gets sent, it's still sent to leaders so they can somewhat try to control the purse strings. But they have groups that do this. Republicans don't. So if they don't get a slice of the pie out of whatever happens here, like Barnes and I have been putting a lot of thought to how, we might want to, Barnes and I may want to do something. We've been putting a lot of thought to it. If they don't get part of that pie, they're not going to care, man. That's not what funds their circle of people, the consultant class. They don't know the first thing about that. We were literally one of the first pollsters to get peer-to-peer capabilities when it first became available. They had no idea what that meant. David can attest to this. They have no idea how to text people, let alone interact with them. They have no clue. So they will try maybe, if they see it as like a new money operation. But they don't really have people who have expertise in this area. There's like one good canvassing firm in the country. There's one good one, that they use. They're always spread very thin, and they kind of know how to push people to get them to hand in their absentee ballots. But that's it, man. I mean, there are more than one, but there is more than one group. But there's only one that's really good at it. It's not a good state of affairs for the Republican Party when it comes to that. And donors will be dissuaded from giving to causes like that if, the cheeses like McConnell and company aren't getting money too. But it's a good question. And in Tim, in response to James, says, yeah, they'll just say that moderate R's can win in the swing states. Yeah, that's their plan. That was always their plan. To tell the voters of the 3rd Congressional District, listen, I can give you massive criticism about how Joe Kent's campaign was run. But the fact of the matter is, Democrats didn't stain Joe Kent. His own party stained him when they tried to get Heidi St. John's enough votes to stop him from being the nominee. Why? Because he refused to vote for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. That's what that came down to. And because he was loyal to President Trump, the former president. I'm trying to wonder what you're asking. You think Trump being on the ballot could push that away until 26? Do you mean the need to deal with mail-in voting? Is that what you mean? I mean, there are some states I do think Trump would have won. Anyway, I do. Wisconsin, definitely. After seeing what I saw, that it's very clear, and I know he's being attacked for it, but Josh Hawley is probably one of the few people to make an intelligent statement so far. There is a very serious problem Republicans are having getting these voters to the polls. And even though they did a better job with educated white voters, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's just not. It doesn't add up. It's just not enough of them. You think Trump being on the ballot could push that? So if that's what you mean, Russ, if you want to clarify and Laura will grab it and send it over, I'd be happy to respond if that's not what you meant. Cali is a good way to learn to harvest for R's and Florida for tactics on voting early. Absolutely. There's a difference though. And I think we're going to ask a lot of questions about this moving forward because we've always been very big on screening by vote method and trying to determine when voters are going to vote and how. There is a huge difference, though, Vader, on Florida Republicans trust the system. They didn't always. They did for a while, but Brenda Snipes and particularly Linda too, but Brenda particularly really. And then we had a lot of incidents. We did that, right, Laura? We had a lot of incidents with votes like that were absentee ballot votes not making it, or
Absolutely,
we had major problems with that. So, even in Gainesville, Laura, even in Gainesville. So it wasn't always like that, but they still were no slouches on early votes. They still voted early. And then early in-person became very popular with Republicans. So, at the end of the day, I think you're going to have to address this distrust and basically say, look, whether you trust it or not, this has to be the way it gets done. Because, again, it's a logistics nightmare. You're asking your voters to do from the hours of a normal state, 7 to 7, 8 to 6, right? 8 to 6:30. In Florida, it's 7 to 7, right, Laura? The polls were open at 7 o'clock in Florida. It was early. And then they closed at 7 p.m. You're asking them to do within that time period as much as the opponents are doing within weeks. And it's just too much. It's not feasible. Does that mean polling needs to change per state due to harvest? So normally you'd go to a likely voter. You need to stay and register voter for, say, Cali, Michigan, Arizona. That's a great question. And that's something we're looking at now, because what we did see is that effectively, this is why I never waited for enthusiasm, but it never was part of our screen, I would say. They effectively eliminated what's called the enthusiasm edge or the enthusiasm advantage. It's totally irrelevant at this point. And it's the second election in a row that happens, so we can probably safely conclude they're, getting rid of enthusiasm gaps. I'm not sure. We are working on something right now with the low propensity voter who will tell you that they won't vote, but then like a Dem operative shows up, especially unions. They're apparently very pushy. So people will like just vote and get their ballot out just to shut them the hell up, just to get them off the front porch. So we're working on, stay tuned for that. But yes, I do think to some extent, likely voter models will have to change. I do. In some states, not all. In Virginia, we did just fine. Nationally, even, we did really well. Pennsylvania is the one state that burns my ass. Everything else, I'm pretty happy with my polling. In Nevada, it was very close. Laxalt barely lost, but at least we knew Lombardo would do better than Laxalt. We had that dynamic down, right? Pennsylvania burns my ass, though, because I've never gotten Pennsylvania wrong. Never. Kevin Dorr says, I have no hope for the Georgia Senate seat. Seems like the GOP abandoned Walker. They're doing to Walker, who's not a bad candidate. Is anyone seriously saying, like, personally, he's a bad guy, bad candidate? He's not. His team isn't great, but look how great the establishment teams are. I reject a lot of this candidate argument. The fact of the matter is, look at what the lieutenant governor said out loud the other day. They are doing this on purpose. They're sabotaging Walker on purpose because they want their boys club back. They don't want to represent you. That's the truth. And anytime, unfortunately for the Republican voter, anytime somebody comes around to challenge their supremacy over the party, they sabotage them. But yet they'll want you to support them. And not for nothing, I don't know if David's still listening or not, but this is why I, always made the case and pissed people off by saying it, but it's true. You shouldn't vote for somebody just because they are the party they are. Unless, of course, you're the abused, woman. Unless, of course, you want to be the abused woman. Nothing will change. Nothing will change. Unless, if there was like some mutual respect there. Nothing will change and you'll go on the way you go on. And that's it. And you can whine yourself into, you'll whine yourself into a managed decline. That's what will happen. And I wouldn't, and when I made these arguments before, the Senate's a little different. But when it comes to stuff like the House, it's a two-year tenure. It's not that big of a deal. You're eventually going to have to teach them their lesson, or else they're just going to continue to mistreat and abuse you forever. That's a good question. Will people moving to South Carolina end up, right? I guess you meant, Nico, being more detrimental to Democrats in general elections by depressing their okay, I see what you're saying. By depressing their progressive base? No. I mean, there's just no evidence of that yet, right? Because maybe eventually it'll lead to an alignment, and of course, alignments always happen. So I don't know if that's possible. The Democratic Party didn't want Joe Biden. They didn't. Everywhere we asked people, their heart was with Bernie. They were just convinced by him. There were two things that happened there. Up front, publicly, you were being told, if you were a Democrat, you were being told that Bernie Sanders could not win. And they were scaring you. Like they pulled the same thing that Fox pulled on Republican voters against Rick Santorum, against Newt Gingrich, against anyone who wasn't their preferred establishment corporate candidate. And, look how that got him. But that's what happened with Joe Biden to voters in 2020. Meanwhile, because they had that period right before South Carolina, And then there was that break between South Carolina and Super Tuesday. And they had to really make sure they pulled it off between that. And there was going to be something else that had to happen if that was really going to work. And that was Barack Obama. They used Barack Obama to make the phone calls because the field was still too crowded and people had to go. So Pete Buttigieg was bribed. He was. This is not a secret. Pete Buttigieg was bribed. He didn't know it was going to be transportation, but Obama told him he can have a cabinet job if he gets, some secretary of something, if he gets the hell out of the race and stops siphoning votes from Joe Biden. And Amy Klobuchar had to be told to get out, especially because her backyard was another key state that people thought Bernie was ahead in Minnesota. In the crowded field, he was ahead. All right. Let me look at this. So I'm not sure. I mean, could it happen? It could. I'm just not sure whether or not it will. What do we got here? I'll read that after. Yeah, it's good though. See, listen. And David, I'm just going to read this to give them an example of like the difference between Republicans who have to deal with this in California for years and have like now made plans to make sure they didn't, right? So this is a memo from Jessica Patterson. She's California Republican Party chairwoman. And she basically is writing out like a December 2nd memo. This is the post-election California Republican Party update for December 2nd. And I just want to read one line because it matters. Because many of the races will come within a few hundred votes, our team is partnering with the below campaigns to run an aggressive ballot curing operation for voters who had their ballot rejected. We anticipate statewide turnout it's abysmal to be 50.8% based on the current turnout of 50.3%. That's an abysmal turnout rate. Abysmal. And that's why they're going to hold on. If they do hold on to yours, David, you see Duarte's leading by about less than 600 votes. If they do, Duarte lost both Stanislaus and Merced. That's because of the lack of Hispanic turnout. The turnout was so bad. Republicans were able to win that seat. David Valadeo is another one. That's California 22. He's going to be in deep trouble when Hispanics actually vote in 2024. Garcia is the man. The man. That guy ran. He had one of the hardest districts to hold on to. He ran a fantastic campaign. Young Kim she'll be all right. I mean, Calvert's another one. Steele's another one. They're going to have some tough races. But man, oh man, Garcia strikes again. But I think he would, because he does well in those in some of those burbs that are, for instance, in 13, there are precincts in Garcia's district that match certain precincts in like Merced County demographically. The difference is in Garcia's district, he does fairly well in those precincts. Whereas if they would have come out this time, then Gray would be he'd have won already. It would have been called already. But that's a great example of how they have to really start moving from this point forward. But that's curing. This has to be done before, well before. Yep. And somebody's just saying, I voted early in Georgia yesterday because I'll be out of town on Tuesday. So many people were coming in, dropping off ballots instead of voting in person. Lloyd, I don't know if you're in a Republican area or not, but you may see that Republicans absolutely are picking up the pace now in Georgia. What happened is that the RNC fought the period of early voting. And as they did, Republicans just sat on their hands. And Democrats were like, I'm just, while I wait for the judge to rule in our favor, as we know they will, we're going to vote. As it says, we are allowed. And they did. Well, Republicans, were like pouting. Now I'm not opening my place till I hear from the judge. It was dumb. They handicapped themselves. That was stupid. Yeah. I don't think moving back to a registered voter poll is the idea. I don't. I think it's just a matter of. That's a good question, though. It's like the other question. I really don't. A state like Pennsylvania, I think we could just deal with this another way. And I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but which reminds me, because I did get more into the weeds in a book club for locals. The math is a little bit more convoluted, and I'm not even sure it's right. So until we really look into it and we see, Pennsylvania is a great example, because it's one of those examples where it's an extreme example. So I don't like asking math to fill in the blanks for me. All right. So if you're talking about weighting just a little bit differently to make sure your shares for vote method are right, that's one thing. But with Pennsylvania, it may be it's a whole another animal entirely. But don't, you just reminded me, don't forget Sunday, because we were talking about this in the book club. There is a way to do it. The amount that we know should have turned out, or, we're looking, was projected to being turned out, then that excess. And we have to start measuring that excess pretty much across the board, because it is worse in some areas than it is in others. In some places, there isn't a problem like that. So if you were to just go to a registered voter poll, it's going to mess up. It's going to mess you up. Anyway, yeah, if you don't need it to do it, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. If you are, we got regulars, and we're getting new people often, but for the size of the locals community, there should be a lot more of you. Tragedy of Great Power Politics, John Mearsheimer. After we just read Jack Schneider, we're doing a bit of a competing thought process, right? Competing theories. And it's good stuff. So you're missing out if you're not seeing it. That's the old edition, by the way. Make sure you buy the new edition, but you don't even need the book, because we read together out loud anyway. I read mostly, and my faithful understudy when I need a drink of water, whatever you want to call him, Dan. He's got a great reading voice, this guy. He'll read some, and so you really don't need the book. It's just, of course, great to have, but check it out, because you'll learn a lot, especially during when we were on Schneider. We always talk and harken back to it, so you learn if you haven't read it. But it was so prescient to read Myths of Empire at that time.
You could also listen to the replay, because we have it on the website. So
that's
on
right.
The website.
It just went up, actually. Part 2, chapter 2, chapter 2, part 1 just went up. And that chapter is Anarchy and the Struggle for Power. Chapter 1 was Introduction, and he just kind of introduces the theory of offensive realism. In chapter 2, he starts to really get into, it's why I broke it up. It's a big chapter. He even says himself, it may be the most important chapter in the book, because I'm detailing the assumptions, the theory, and then the rest of it is just weighing the theory against the historical record, right? Explaining strategies nation states employ to gain relative power. Myths of Empire was more about domestic coalition politics theory, which is very helpful when we look at elections, for instance. Because they're without a doubt, cartelized politics in this country at this point. And if you've read the book, you know what I mean. All right. It's not a democracy. It's not. It would not be a democracy under Schneider's definition anymore. Does Four Patriots deliver to third world countries? I'm in Canada right now. I just got that. I had to read. You're saying Canada's a third world country? I believe Four Patriots does, in fact, deliver to Canada. I'm not sure they consider it a third world country, but I understand what you're saying. Tell Dave I said hello. Got to get Eva back on here. He's always a great talk. Let's see. Yep. You got a lot of the same questions about the registered voter. The problem is, again, it's not across the board, even in a state. So If you would have done that in Arizona, for instance, it may have helped you at Maricopa, but it would have screwed you over with the, quote, rest of the state because of the turnout rates being different, right? So it's not the issue. In Pennsylvania, like the last one, it may have helped you in southeastern Pennsylvania, but to do a registered voter only, but it would have screwed you everywhere else. So it's not a blanket change that you can make, but it's a great question, and it's a great direction of like, where do you start? When you're trying to figure out how to address this, where do you start? Think about it too, though, folks. It's really not that far off. So some people had it really, really bad, like the Laxalt +5s and stuff. Yeah, those people had a bad time. But it's still not that far off. Even in 2020, when we had a lot of vote by mail, I mean, what do we have in Wisconsin? We overstated Biden in Wisconsin, for instance. Overstated him. So what explains that, right? With all these MAGA Republicans who lost in different states, why don't all of them run for state GOP chair so everyone gets completely undermined like J.R. Majewski and many others Kevin screwed? Well, you're talking about doing an all-out war. I mean, listen, this is the ultimate problem for the base. If you're, part of that, you're going to have to take over parts of that infrastructure. Otherwise, this is just going to keep happening to you. It's just going to keep happening to you. And for those who say, well, it's better than a Democrat, is it? If you believe that they voted to keep earmarks because they want to control the power of the purse, you're a lost cause. If you're naive enough to believe that, you're about a lost cause at this point. When was the last time the Republican Party used the power of the purse? When they had both chambers to try to block Obamacare, or at least they had plans, but they took the Senate in 2014. But when Ted Cruz was elected, he tried to use the power of the purse. What happened? John Boehner and Mitch McConnell smeared him all through Politico and all through the Washington Post. They made him a pariah. He almost lost re-election in 2018 to Beto O'Rourke. So, I mean, come on. They kept the earmarks because they have no intention of dealing with runaway spending or inflation. I know, Teton. I know. In a close presidential election when Trump supposedly lost, Republicans won all 15 toss-up House seats, and the best first-term incumbent midterm for reps in decades. They won 9 to 10 seats without Trump. Enough said. Good for you. Good for you. And we were talking about this on the Locals Book Club quite a bit, and we went into great detail. Even if you take into consideration the voter that comes out because they hate Donald Trump, it's still a net plus for the entire Republican Party in general. It is. It's about a 1-to-3 ratio. So for every 3 voters that Trump gets involved and participate when they otherwise wouldn't, maybe 1 gets involved to participate against him who otherwise wouldn't. There simply is a constituency that will go out and they will vote for Trump. And if Republicans are on the ballot, they'll benefit from that. That's how Pat Toomey won in Pennsylvania in 2016. He would have lost. All of the senators that went against Trump lost. Why? Because they were Republican. They knew they were against him, and they didn't vote for him. Mark Kirk, Kelly Ayotte, right? And on and on. So good for you that you see that. The Republicans should stop blaming people and take responsibility and do 2 things. Figure out how you're going to win over that voter because you cannot win without them. And number 2, get yourself an infrastructure that is actually worth the money. $1 billion for a permanent data operation that has massive latency problems is something we've been screaming about for years. Their database, even my own, suffers from issues like that. All of them do. But theirs is so much slower than mine, so much slower to update than my own. It's ridiculous. It's garbage. The truth of the matter is their voter target data is garbage. It's crap. David, where are you? It's trash. Right, David? Trash. How many phone numbers did I have to amend for them? How many addresses did I have to amend for them? Right? It's crap. So you have to get that taken care of. The truth is the left uses much better data tools, and I don't mind working with left-wing vendors. They're better. And then they need to figure out how to implement that information, what to do with that information once they get it. That's crazy. It looks like I'm not even drinking because the coffee cup's green. Rich, so is one of the problems in midterms our own side doesn't get the importance of governors? Yup. I mean, that's just true. And then also, listen, there very much is something that's going on. All right. And we probably should talk about it. I was just talking about it with somebody else, and I don't want to give away my I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for, Laura? I don't want to breach their trust. And hold on for a second here. I don't want to breach their trust or
Not only that,
violate their confidence.
or
Right.
be subpoenaed, because if you release any information,
Yeah. That's right. She's getting it. Just don't even say anymore. All right. There was when it comes to what happened with the governors this time around, there very much was an effort to make sure to not help, to sabotage at all costs, particularly 3 candidates, but it was it was a larger scope operation, but particularly 3 gubernatorial candidates. 2 they gave show support for, but didn't actually help. And 1 they outwardly just completely abandoned because he was easier to abandon. But the goal was not to do so because they didn't like these candidates. We don't see eye to eye. They were trying to prevent Donald Trump from winning the Electoral College. They want to shut him out of the Electoral College. So if a snowball's chance in hell, it comes down to, let's say, Pennsylvania, right? They just cannot afford to keep, because Wisconsin, you may not be able to stop him, frankly. It's just the truth. In Georgia goes back, like polling, it's not, again, only May, but in Georgia's another example. Trump's lead was huge in all of these polls. And whereas the generic ballot and the Senate races were close, Trump's lead was huge. So they're terrified about this. They know it. They've seen it. And they want to prevent him. And they want many different options to do so. So if Doug Mastriano, for instance, became the governor, they are aware. That's why I'm trying to get to your answer a little bit differently here, because they are aware how important the governorship is. They would rather it go to Democrats than go to somebody like Doug Mastriano, who may, God forbid, enforce the law and make sure, or not make sure, but all but ensure that Trump has a good chance to carry the Keystone State, or at least a better chance. And in Arizona, I know this. I know it for a fact. Kari Lake shouldn't have made it public. She intended to model Arizona off of Florida. So they didn't want Kari Lake to win. So when you look at what happened on Election Day, and if you think that's beneath them, then you're very naive. It's just the truth. They are thinking, oh my God, what if, Arizona and Georgia go back to him, and, Pennsylvania's not enough. Wisconsin, he carries Wisconsin. It turned out, again, that Wisconsin is actually the most Trump-friendly state out of the 3, even though it polls almost worse sometimes. It turned out to be the most, and that's because it's so rural, too. It's more rural than Michigan and Pennsylvania, so it's harder to poll. But it turned out to be more Trump-friendly. So let's God forbid, just assume we cannot stop him in Wisconsin, right? And he gets Arizona and he gets Georgia. Well, then that's it. It's over. He's won. He's the president again. And oh my God, that's the end of the world. So we have to block them in this trio, So Evers, he managed to stay alive, but Michaels had money, and you didn't hear about the issues that others had because Michaels was able to self-fund. All right, Mastriano was destroyed in the two major media markets. He had no money. That's a really good question. And this is also why this idea, Republicans lost independence. That's not really true. Democrats were very good and efficient with getting their mail-in vote in. So they did better than they would have done within the potential, the recipe for a major win. Like Tone said before, the recipe for a major win was there all along. They didn't do an efficient enough job to get the electorate that they needed out. And so when you look at and you hear comments like that about independence, really, because in Illinois, for instance, they went pretty damn Republican, right? And that's a good question. And it's a good point at what motivates them to do so. I imagine, and by the way, look at New York, for crying out loud. What motivates them to do it? I guess it depends on the different state. Crime was a major issue for Zeldin in the state of New York. So independents absolutely were voting on crime and the economy. But it didn't resonate in a place like Philadelphia for some reason. All right. Maybe that was part of the campaigns. They just made those mistakes, right? In Illinois, there's a major problem. And if you're looking, because look at the counties you cited, actually, the suburbs of Cook, right? There used to be these neighborhoods. Ask Steve Cortez, he'll tell you. There used to be these neighborhoods, even in Chicago, that were like very yuppie, very rich, very affluent. And there was no crime there. You just didn't go on the wrong side of town. And now there are people who are literally hiring their own personal family security force. And it's different. It's just different than it used to be. So I imagine for some, the issues were economic. DuPage County, for instance, and that's pretty economic. But when you're looking at the suburbs outside of Cook, you have to think that crime played a pretty big role. That's a really good question, because we tend to want to paint, especially independents. We want to paint them with the same brush, and that's never true. Wow, here's a fun question. We could end on this one, and just to give you an update again on Georgia, real quick, last before we go. We'll see what it looks like at the end of the day, but early voting absolutely did get better for Republicans. It's just that Democrats had a 2-day head start over Republicans. So very stupid. Okay, you're talking about the article in the American Thinker, right? Does anybody have that link? We'll go over it real quick. I'm not sure I have it right in front of me, but does anybody have that link? Somebody asked about, but that's what you're talking about, right? You're talking about somebody said, I lost it. Yeah, the Valentine article on voter fraud. Any thoughts? I have been arguing, and if it's the article I think I'm talking about, right? It is. It's that one from the American Thinker. Without a doubt, the national change of address flag. We were just talking about latency and database. A perfect example. When you move, like Laura and I did, and you go from one state to the other, the last thing you do is call the supervisor of election in Florida and tell them, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm still registered to vote, and I moved. So please take me off and make sure that I'm no longer on the rolls as an eligible and active voter." And then you go and you vote in another state after you register, right? The only way states have and others have to pick up whether or not, because voters don't do that, is the change of address flag. So you're putting in for the post office, you want to make sure your mail gets forwarded, whatever it is. And then there's what's called a change of address flag that goes off on our voter files and others. The problem is that it takes forever. There are always more people who are ineligible to vote because of a change of address flag than you know about. So I have been talking about the very simple. It's not only is it possible, it's very simple to exploit that, especially if there are unsolicited mail-in ballots going out. However, the claims that they're making in that article, they don't offer any records. Like we offered records, individual records. Here is the voter we're talking about. There's an issue with this voter record. How could they have possibly requested an absentee ballot on October 14th to vote in Michigan if they now live in Idaho and have for the last 15 years? Somebody want to give me the absentee ballot affidavit, the AB request affidavit, which a voter would get to say, look, I no longer live here, but make sure I'm still eligible and make sure my ballot gets to this address. I understand the theory he's putting forward. The problem is he's giving me no evidence. He's giving me no actual evidence. If you truly did run all of these checks, then you would have no problem sending over a list of records that I can therefore go through myself and make sure that that's true. And by the way, I wouldn't be the only one who could do it. You could have people who could fact check you on it. I have no doubt that it happens. No doubt whatsoever. But you have to show me records. Yeah, and this is it right here. Yes, it is the Jay Valentine article. Okay. Let me just share it so everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's the American. Thank you for whoever shared it. It is the American Thinker. And what he's saying is, this is when a Secretary of State is in on the, right? Again, this is what I had been screaming about since before the 2020 election, right? We went over, I opened up the voter rolls, and I showed you absolutely how easy it would be. And which is why in Florida, we do not have unsolicited ballot requests, okay? The problem is, I really need to see proof. Like we released a report with records that somebody could go and fact check and someone could go and look at and chase down those records and verify or not verify. You can't just make a claim like that. Anybody could take to an article and say, I found this X number of, and I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying they didn't provide that information. And until they do, then you should be skeptical of the numbers they provide because it's no doubt going to happen in every election. The question is by how much? And you got to be able to back that up. So let's end with a funny question. Okay. Where is that funny question? What is the worst possible Republican ticket that could lose by historic wipeout, electoral wipeout? Romney McMuffin. Oh, God, that one would go down in flames. Pompeo Haley. Oh, boy, that one would crash and burn. They'd lose North Carolina. And they'd lose everywhere. That's some good ones. Give me some time, and we should do this. We should have a new segment, worst Republican tickets, and speculate on this. I'm going to give you credit for that. That's a fun question, Jonathan. Jonathan G94. Fun question. We should even consider doing a segment on it. I love it. I think it's hilarious. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to have to boogie for the day. I will see you guys, locals. I'll see you on Sunday. Okay. What?
I got it. I got a good number.
Oh, you got one? Okay.
Yeah. Jeb Bush and Kamala Harris.
That's no, just Republicans.
Yeah, well, you could pay her to be in any position.
Oh, no. No. Did she say that? Romney Cheney. That's a good one. That is a great one. Pence Cheney. Pence Kinzinger. All right, you guys are jumping in. Get your submissions in. I love them. We're doing that. Blue Saturday said you were right. A Trump DeSantis ticket, I really think would be unbeatable because there are people who love DeSantis but don't like Trump. There are people who like Trump but are getting very skeptical on DeSantis. I think that's an unbeatable ticket. I really do. I don't think that ticket could lose. I don't care what they do. I don't care how many drop boxes they put all over town. I don't think that ticket would lose at all. Man, she would. Gaylord said she'd do it for free. All right, you guys are going to get me in trouble, so I'm going to get out of here. Don't forget, book club, 3 p.m. Sunday, Eastern Standard Time. We're moving on. We're in chapter 2. We will look at the limits of hegemony, the power and fear. We will talk a little bit about what is called the stopping power of water, but the hierarchy of state goals. All right. So don't forget. Ye Fuentes. That's a good one too. All right, get your submissions in and we'll talk more about it. We'll pick a couple. We'll go through a bunch of them. All right, folks, I'm out. Have a good but safe weekend. And listen, we're already in the holiday season. Try to enjoy yourselves. All right. I am. And don't forget, don't let it blast by. Christmas comes and goes so fast. If you celebrate Hanukkah, even though you have obviously multiple days, it comes and it goes so fast. So first, think of it as a season and enjoy the season. All right. Because it truly is the season to be jolly. And I am going to try to be myself. Holly jolly. Already looking like it around here. All right. All the best. See you on Sunday.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a